Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for attending our special two-part workshop series on change management, specifically 5 strategies that make change easy and almost painless. Many of you have attended our interactive umbrella forums in the past, which covers features and functionality in SysPro, but this workshop is on a non-SysPro topic, but I think we all can agree that change management is very relevant when implementing software, new versions of SysPro, new functionality in SysPro. So a new systems implementation wouldn't be successful if users aren't able to adapt to that change. So I met Rnold Smith in December at our Team Gift Drive charity event. I really enjoyed talking to Rnold about change management. I found his thoughts to be super insightful. So I invited Rnold to share his insights with all of you. So I'm really pleased to present Rnold Smith. He's an experienced business coach and organizational change facilitator. But before I pass it over to Rnold, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. So you can turn off your cameras and microphones, but feel free to unmute and ask a question. So similar to our forums where we like to keep it interactive, feel free to ask questions or enter a question into the chat box anytime. There will also be Q&A at the end if you wanted to ask a question and then we answer it at the end. But we're keeping this workshop fairly informal. Rnold has a really great agenda that he's going to go through. This is a 2-part series, so this is part 1 where he's covering 3 out of the 5 strategies, and part 2 will be the other 2 strategies. And one last thing is this presentation is being recorded. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rnold.
Okay, great. Oh, and that was Karen. I think you all know Karen.
Oh, yeah. I don't
yeah,
know
you
if I
want to
need to introduce
yourself?
myself. Well, I
Yeah,
think
sure.
everybody here knows me, but I am the CEO of Umbrella Consulting, and I think all of the companies here in this workshop today are our direct customers. So I thank you again for coming to the workshop and your interest in the workshop.
Excellent. And Karen, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just going to quickly give you a bit of background of where I'm coming from. Ultimately, my goal as a consultant and business coach is to help people and to have the best experience of work and life as possible. I really focus on behavior change because to me, ultimately, it's all behavior change. Some of the work that I've done involves around culture transformation. I work with a lot of leaders in leadership development. And then oftentimes I'm working with individuals around personal evolution. I have a very diverse background in terms of the roles that I've been in: not-for-profit, hospitality, finance, professional services, entertainment, construction. So I've had a lot of different roles in my life, which really enables me to understand a lot of different clients and also bring best practices from multiple industries. I've been doing this for a while. I've got a bunch of certifications. One of the things I noticed in my work many years ago was that it doesn't matter how good the information is. It doesn't matter how moved people are by the information they received. If there's no behavior change, there's no impact. And so I built an app that's designed to support behavior change. And a lot of the research that I'll be talking about today came from that experience of understanding how do you build an app that actually supports people to change their behavior, not just get more information. So the agenda today is pretty simple. Ultimately, there's 3 of the 5 strategies, as Karen mentioned. We're going to talk about the change management goals and a couple of models, so that we're not spending much time on that. Ultimately, we want to focus on the 3 issues that are going to cause change initiatives to fail, both personally and also as an organization, talk about the strategies to address those issues, and hopefully have a nice, robust discussion and question and answer period at the end. I am committed to deliver information that's going to make a difference for you. And I am going to talk about how you can get the most value from this presentation. So the model that I think is very good, developed by Jim Quick, is the FAST model. And the first step is you need to forget what you know. And what I mean by that is, as soon as if I start talking about a topic and your brain says, oh, I know that, it stops the opportunity to learn something. And I invite you to find the very edge of your knowledge. And what I mean by that is, you might know that topic, but find where there could be improvement. You might be 90% effective. We want to get you to the 95. So forget what you know, come with a beginner's mind. Be really active. What that means is, as I'm speaking, the more that you can apply what I'm talking about to specific circumstances in your life, the more value you'll get. If it becomes just a theoretical concept, it might feel nice. You might enjoy the presentation and the information, but it won't necessarily provide the most value. Finally is the state. If you're distracted, um, if you're focused on something else, it'll be very hard for you to get the full value of this presentation. And it's going to move quite quickly. 3 strategies in an hour is a big ask. And so it's as much as possible, if you can be here and present, that's gonna be what gives you the most value. And if you actually make a plan to teach something that you learned today within the next 24 hours, it will deepen your understanding and ensure that you've actually learned the concept. So moving along, because I said we'd move quickly. That was caught. Okay, so the first goal is to we look at what is a change management goal in general, is to get people to love the change as quickly as possible. Now, that might be different from getting people to do the change. It's not about just having people tolerate the change. Ideally, where we want to get to is that people love the change. And when that happens, then the change that was implemented improved everyone's life, which is why would you want to make a change in the first place? It's only to create an improvement. So if you just get to tolerating the change, you haven't actually improved anyone's life. So, there's a bunch of different models, the Cotter's 8-step process, the ADKAR model, Lewin. So if you search on the internet, you're going to come up with a bunch of different models to help you effectively manage change. And all of them have some level of complexity to it. But ultimately, what we're talking about today is, how do you deal with everything that they're talking about in the most simplified way possible, which is the goal today, is to simplify how do you get to people loving change. As we're going along, I'm going to move pretty quickly, but I really invite you to think about a specific change that you're either currently working on, CISPRO would be a good one, or personally working on. The new year just happened, so you might have a personal change that you're trying to achieve. Both of those things would ensure that you get the most impact and that most understanding. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to invite you to write down some thoughts about that change. And at the end of this, ideally what you're going to have is a really good understanding of what you can do specifically to improve the change that you're trying to make. So with that, oftentimes when people are struggling with change, it's quite personal. So rather than force you guys into a discussion which might be uncomfortable, I'd like you to just kind of note, if you have any questions, we might save that for the end. If there's something that happens and you're not understanding, you can't see my screen or you can't hear me anymore, by all means, unmute and let me know. But I think that it's going to be more effective if we kind of just move through the information. We're at 10:41 now. So I've got 49 minutes to complete this. Ideally, we'll have about 5 or 10 minutes at the end for a discussion. And that's going to require that I move fairly quickly. So hopefully you stay with me. Karen, I'm going to look to you to make sure that if I'm missing the mark on anything, that you pipe in and say, wait, wait, wait. Deal?
I will not hesitate.
Okay, good. One of the things I just want to say, again, thank you for inviting me, Karen, is throughout this process, I have really appreciated Karen's attention to the level of excellence that she demands for herself and for Umbrella, and of me. That there was a lack of any possibility that this workshop wasn't going to be successful. And so she was really, intent on ensuring that you guys were going to get the most value. So if you are working with Karen, you are in good hands, in my humble opinion. Okay,
Thank you,
so
Rnold.
yeah, you're welcome. So issue number one is that we don't actually effectively deal with fear or pain effectively. So be super clear that change inflicts pain. I'm going to talk about why that happens. But most of the time, that's not the way we think about it. Like, it's just a different task. We just, instead of looking at this screen, you're going to look at this screen. Instead of doing this routine, you're going to do this routine. It doesn't immediately occur like you're inflicting pain on someone. But you need to be 100% clear that there is no growth without pain. There is no change without pain. Change is always inherently uncomfortable. And that means that, sorry, I need some water. So that means that when you're approaching change, especially as a leader with your team, you need to approach it like you're a dentist about to give a shot. This is, or a doctor, this is something that's going to help them, but it's going to be painful at first. And it's really important to understand that when you know you're inflicting pain on someone, you act a certain way. You're not like, oh, it's nothing. You just say, yeah, listen, I know this is going to be painful. You have an approach. And when you keep that in your heart, you're going to have the right mentality and level of empathy that's going to help people get to the loving change faster. So the reason why change inflicts pain is because the brain's primary job is to predict threats, to keep us safe. That's what our brains are designed to do. So with any change, what our brain immediately does is imagine all the threats. And then once it imagines the threat, it communicates to us in the form of fear. So when we experience fear, it's our brain predicting the possibility of pain. And depending on your relationship to change, the level of fear that your brain provides for you will be different. So if you've successfully done a bunch of change in the past, your level of fear is going to be less. If you've struggled with change in your past, the level of fear is going to be more. And that's why people react differently to change. Some people, one little change can completely throw off their day, their week. Other people are extremely comfortable with change and, in fact, understand that change is necessary for their growth. But people have vastly different experiences of that. The unknown is always a threat. So as soon as something unknown is happening, that's when our brain predicts threats and says, well, what are all the possible ways that this might inflict pain? Now, when we were living in the jungle and we had to fight animals, it was about our physical safety. But what our brain is mostly predicting now is that our psychological safety is threatened. Now, the thing to understand is this happens automatically and below our level of awareness. Most of us don't really understand or can point to what is causing us to feel the way we feel or act the way we act. It just feels like, well, I just don't like it, or I just don't want to. So when you don't understand how to effectively deal with pain, or you don't address the pain or fear, then your change is going to struggle. So where is fear going to pain up? This is, I do an exercise with my leadership clients around understanding what their needs are. And their needs are based on past experiences that cause fears. And so these are the fears that are very common that almost everyone has or some form of, but no one really admits to it. So the fear of not looking good, that looks like, just struggling in front of other people. Maybe they're doing a new task where they used to be really good at it and now they're not. For some people, that is their worst fear. And so when you inflict change on them where there's going to be struggle, that's going to trigger this fear. And so oftentimes the fear that you're dealing with is way bigger than what it should be based on the task. And that's because you're triggering these really deep basic fears. The fear of not being liked. What if now I can't serve my customers? What if my supervisor or boss doesn't like me? What if my coworkers don't like me as much? That fear is way more powerful than I need to change this screen to this screen. And a lot of people get into a mode of operating where they're comfortable. They like doing it this way. They always do it this way. They do it over and over again. And any change feels like a loss of control. So what you're doing is actually directly impacting their feeling of feeling safe. Now, as I said, these fears are carefully hidden. You may see them for yourselves or you might not. But trust me that our entire personality, all of our actions, even the stuff that is our virtues, has a basis in how we dealt with pain in the past. So understanding how to deal with fear is really important. So this is a workbook exercise. People are going to have different fears. And as I have a friend who's a VP of technology for many years, and has implemented many different software applications. And one of the things he said is, if there is no support from the senior leaders or executives, the owners, the board of directors, if there's no, then the change is going to struggle and fail. So if you have a workbook, I invite you to take a moment and think, what are one or two fears of senior leaders and executives? Likely the biggest fear being that this software application or this change isn't going to create the results that we hope for. But that will trigger all the other fears: not looking good, worry about looking bad, loss of control. You also want to imagine the managers and supervisors, different fears than the people. So oftentimes managers and supervisors really like being liked. They want to take care of people. And one of the fears that will show up in a change is that people are going to be unhappy and they're not going to know what to do about it. And finally, the team members. What are their fears going to be? Not, ultimately they're going to lose the routine, but they're going to be afraid maybe they can't take care of their customers as well, that their experience of work is going to be diminished, that they are going to struggle permanently. That's what our brains say. Our brains don't go, we're going to jumping ahead to the solution here, but our brains don't jump to how it's going to work out. What's automatically there by default is how it's not going to work out. So hopefully you have a fear of each of those kind of listed to give you insight. In the future, if you really want to make a comprehensive list for the specific fears for the specific change, I would encourage you to do that. And oftentimes when you're dealing with this fear, it's not about directly dealing with the fear. Like, Karen, I know you're afraid of not looking good, so let me help you with that. That is probably not going to result in success, because Karen's like, I don't care about that. She's going to be defensive on that. So as a leader, you have to be able to listen for the fears and address them without directly impacting them. So how do you communicate in a way that addresses the fears without directly pinning that on the person? Because they may not even be aware of that. Okay, so that brings us to strategy number 1. And that includes telling the whole story. So I mentioned in the last slide that, sorry, just looking at my timing here. I mentioned in the last slide that our brains will predict the threat, but won't automatically predict the outcome. So the goal of this strategy is to make the unknown known and be very clear about what success looks like. And then the actually in brackets is to make sure that you're describing what success looks like in a way that people are excited about. And we'll talk about some of the pitfalls of that in a minute. So there's a book written by Dr. Daniel Siegel called The Whole-Brained Child. Dr. Siegel is the founder of the Mindfulness Institute and the director of psychiatry at UCLA. He's written about 13 books, and one of his books is, again, The Whole-Brained Child. And he talks about a strategy to prevent, this is good for all the parents out there, to prevent trauma from forming in children. And what happens, let's say you get into a car accident and the child is very small. It happens, it works for everybody, but especially when the child is small. What will happen is that event will be imprinted on the child's brain. And what'll happen, there'll be lots of stuff that happens after. Oh, we got into a car accident. There was a big noise. Maybe you got hurt. And our brains don't complete the story. In form of trauma, it stops at the negative event. And so it's really important to tell the whole story. So he suggests things like, we got into a car accident, we got a little hurt, and then we went to the doctor and they fixed us up and we got ice cream and then we took care of each other and we got to spend some time together. Keep telling the story so it goes past the traumatic event. So in their minds, they're telling the whole story, not just the story up to the negative event. So every day when people wake up with a new change, the immediate thing they're going to predict is the struggle of that change. They're going to know, oh my God, I got to do it with that new system again. Oh my God, that's immediately what's going to be there. That's just, again, the way their brains work. So the job of leadership is to help them to tell the whole story so that when their brains automatically offer up, oh my God, I got to struggle with that new thing, they hear in their heads, but it's going to provide better service. They hear in their heads, but it's going to make it teamwork easier eventually. They're going to hear in their heads what you have helped them understand, which is the whole story, the success, how it makes better for them. Now, as Brene Brown says, one of my heroes, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And if you tell the story in a way where you leave things out or you step over things, that won't be clear. That's not helpful because it won't land as true. So as much as possible, be clear and straightforward with what is going to happen and how it's going to occur. Ignoring the fact that we are going to experience pain is not going to prevent the pain. In fact, it's going to make it worse. I already talked about get stuck on the threat, so finish the story. And this is the part where don't sugarcoat it, you'll lose trust. As you're telling the story, if you say at the end you're going to have all these wonderful things, but you said it's going to be easy or it's not going to be that difficult, or you kind of created this expectation of ease and it's not that, then they won't believe you when you say it's going to get better. And they'll live with this mistrust, and this telling the story won't be effective. So letting people know, yeah, there's going to be a time where there's a learning curve, this is the thing, and how to deal, but making sure that you have the whole story. And you got to tell it way more than you think. Every morning when you wake up, there's going to be a prediction of pain. And so if you've only told the story once, it'll be this kind of vague, kind of ambiguous idea off in the distance, and it won't appear in their head. So, people remember way less than we think. We think, well, I told them a lot. But if they can't tell you exactly what success is going to look like, if they struggle with that, then you haven't told the story long enough. A couple of things that are typical mistakes is we're doing this so that we can be more profitable. We can do this so that we have better data. We want to improve decision making. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to enable us to grow market share. All of the big organizational business goals, which are the actual reality of why you might be implementing a system like SysPro, people don't really care about. That it's a concept that they, of course, sort of care about, but on a day-to-day basis, it's separate. That's not what they care about today or right now. So it's really important to phrase it in a way that people actually care about. So how is it going to make their experience of work better? Less duplicated effort, less repetition, easier communication, a better teamwork, a professional development. You're going to learn how to understand to use cloud software or interact with, machine learning. You're going to interact with, you're going to develop yourself. More flexibility and freedom. It's going to enable you to be able to do this, in the morning, at night. You're going to have different options. And then personal financial gain. Now, oftentimes the change doesn't necessarily create personal financial gains. You want to be careful about that promise. But people do understand that if the organization as a whole increases its profitability, then it might possibly trickle down to them. And if you have a profit sharing or some, then you can really point to, this is really going to help with that strategy. But talking about the company being more successful is not going to create people a future that people really care about. So you want to be really specific about what they're going to care about. So I invite you now to take a minute and write down an idea of what people are actually going to care about. So how is it going to make their life easier? How is it going to make their experience of working easier? Is there something they're going to learn through this process that is actually going to impact them? Now, make sure that you're not just talking about the individuals. What about the leaders? And that would be, especially for consultants, continuing to communicate how it's going to make it better for the organization, but in a way that individual leaders care about. So the purpose of this slide is just to give you a couple of moments to jot down how that works. I'm just checking my notes here for timing. Not bad. Don't forget about the leaders, ultimately tell the whole story. Yes, there's going to be problems. Things are going to come up. We're going to deal with those problems, and then they're going to become less and less and less. People are going to become happier and happier and happier, and eventually this outcome will happen. Because if they're not predicting the failure, if they're not predicting the struggle, when it shows up, it's going to activate all their fears. But if it shows up and they're expecting it, then they can see that next step. It's really easy to say, oh yeah, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. Don't worry about it. It's going to be easy. It's really tempting to do that. But it's not the strategy that will ultimately create the success that you want, in my humble opinion. Okay, hopefully you've got a couple of things jotted down there. Issue number 2, not supporting habit formation. So the goal of a change isn't to have people do new actions. The goal is to form new habits. Now, if anyone here has ever tried to change a habit or something they've done automatically for years and years, you understand that this is actually way harder than you think. The task, the action, isn't the issue. It's never that the task is too difficult. Sit-ups are easy, or push-ups are, they have a certain level of, they're not complex, but doing them over and over again requires something. Changing your routine requires something. The idea that it's only an extra 5 minutes a day, or just find 15 minutes in your day and you can change your life, is way harder than people really give it credit for. It's only 15 minutes. But we are creatures of habit by design. Our brains, when we're approaching something new, our entire brain activates. 90% of the brain is activated to understand this new change. In a habit, when we're in the habit loop, very little of the brain lights up. Very little of the brain is used. Every action has an associated neural pathway. The more that you do that action, your brain will want to improve or increase the neural pathways. The old action, if it's been done for days, weeks, months, years, will have very strongly developed neural pathways. There will be a pull to do it the old way. Our survival instincts in our brains says do things as efficiently as possible. Use as little resources as you can. That will always be the pull. And so understanding that what you're doing is going against people's survival instincts in trying to change a new habit. And that's what makes it so difficult. So how do you change a habit? Contrary to popular belief, a habit is not formed by repetition. A habit is only formed when there's a craving for a reward. I'm going to talk about the habit cue for a sec here, but ultimately the habit has an anatomy. There's a cue, something that triggers the behavior. There's a routine, the action that we do, and then there's some reward that we get from that. And, in things like smoking or, bad habits, the reward may no longer be present, but the craving for the reward will remain. So maybe you got something from smoking initially, you felt cool, you whatever it was, and then you crave that feeling, but you do the action even long past when the reward is actually present. So you must create a craving for a reward. Deleting that craving is very hard to do. So the fastest and easiest way to create a new habit is actually to keep the cue and the reward with a different routine. Now, the reward, for example, for smoking, hopefully no ex-smokers here, I'm not traumatizing anyone. I'm a reformed smoker as well. If you understand the reward is not directly the thing, the reward is, for essentially looking cool, a cure for boredom might be a cure. So from a client perspective or from a software implementation perspective, the reward is the job complete. The reward is a sense of satisfaction. The reward is customers taken care of. And then understanding the cues. If you want to geek out on habit formation, there's 3 books I recommend. One is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Another is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And a third is Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. I'm going to introduce you to BJ Fogg in a second. It's very, very important to have clear, simple steps. In a second, I'm going to explain why. But the easier the action, the less motivation is needed. So I want to talk, this is 2 minutes. BJ Fogg is an author, has been a professor at Stanford for 30 years. In every action we do, 3 things happen at the same moment. We are motivated to do it, we have the ability to do it, and some sort of trigger happened. Now, most of the time, triggers are below our level of awareness, but all 3 need to occur in order for an action to happen. One of the best ways to create triggers is to use a process called habit stacking. Habit stacking is looking at existing behaviors and using that as a cue for a new behavior routine. After I sit down at my desk, I will. So after I will is habit stacking. And in software implementation, we want to find those cues so that you're triggering the new behavior and helping to understand that. So after you click this button, do these three things. Okay, right. Now, the lower the motivation and the harder the activity to do, the less likely the trigger will succeed. So as a change leader, increasing the motivation and making the task as easy as possible will mean that the cue or the trigger succeeds. So increasing motivation, that's the strategy one. Complete, make sure people have the whole story. Oh yeah, why am I doing this? Keep that change present. We're doing this so that we get to this future that we all want. So motivation remains high. The simpler, the less people have to think about what they need to do, the more likely they'll do it. So understanding where your complexity is and simplifying it is very helpful when it comes to having people take action so that your triggers will succeed. So ultimately, you want to do two things. Where are you creating a negative association? So looking at the change, and this is really true for us as individuals. Like I started running, or I wanted to do a new habit, or whatever it is, and then we don't do it as well or as often as we like, and then we beat ourselves up for it. And then we create a negative association with the new habit. Oh, I was going to exercise every day. I only did it once this week. Instead of being like, woohoo, I did it once this week, we're like, I'm failing. And then our brains are very helpful. They really want us to help avoid pain. So we skip right past that. So just see, where are you creating a negative association, and where are the steps too complex? Where do people have to decide? Hopefully you have a note about one or two of those. Moving along. So strategy number 2, so we're at 11:09. We've got 20 minutes left. So we're going to go quickly. That was actually had the most information. So this next part, hopefully we'll go a little faster. So creating a positive association, there's 3 strategies I'm going to help you do that. One is appreciation. And specifically, you want to be really good at giving appreciation. You can completely change the way someone behaves just by appreciating them better. And so you can appreciate someone in 3 different levels: for what they do, how they do it, and who they're being while they do it. The more personalized the appreciation, the bigger the impact. So thank you for doing that task is appreciating someone for what they do. There's often people, especially in a work environment, have very little choice about what they do. So appreciating them for what they do doesn't have a big impact. Thank you for doing that task so happily, or so impeccably, or so completely. Now you are appreciating them for a choice that they made, which was how they did the task. And that will have a bigger choice because they made that choice. You're appreciating them on a deeper level. Now, who they're being, thank you for being so open and supportive. Thank you for being enthusiastic. Thank you for being so positive. Now you're appreciating them for something that goes to the core of who they are, something they've often worked very hard to achieve. And when you appreciate someone on that level, it's not something that just flies by. That's something that might actually shift how they're feeling about themselves for a day, a week, a year, especially as a leader. When you appreciate someone for being so meticulous, so hardworking, they makes them feel really proud. Like, I can really acknowledge Jermaine for the willingness. I mean, so you guys know, she sent the completed slide. I don't know if I want to out her here, but she worked very hard on making this happen and went above and beyond. And that's who she is, really supportive. It makes it really easy to work with. Now there's an impact. So you're being very specific about what it is and more personalized. Share the impact. How did it make you feel? How does it impact your team members? Thank you for doing this so enthusiastically. It makes my life so much easier, makes me feel like we're a great team, and ultimately I can see that it's going to make sure that all of our customers are going to have a better experience, and then we're all going to be rich. Okay, maybe not the last part, but you kind of get the picture. Ultimately, there's an impact for the actions, and when you add that piece, it just makes the appreciation more meaningful. And courage, give people courage. That's what encourage means. So sometimes people are going to predict struggle when they're really good at it, like they've already done this before. And so helping people to see past successes. Hey, remember when you were worried about the phone system upgrade and you were terrified and you were worried you weren't going to be able to do this, and then we did it and it was like, yeah, there was a little bit of struggle, but we got to the end and eventually you were a master at it, and now you're one of the best in the company. This is going to be like that. So that helps them to have more courage and confidence about the future by pointing to a past success. And similar to the appreciation, when you can connect their character, they might not have had experience with a software upgrade, but they might be very determined. They might be very studious. They might be very open. And those character traits are going to support future success. That also gives people courage and confidence. Finally, celebrating progress. Excuse me. ABC is what I tell people who are developing new habits. Always be celebrating. Always be celebrating. You discovered a problem, something to celebrate. You're having a different struggle than you were a week ago. That's something to celebrate. It feels just a tiny bit easier. That's all progress. The more that you can celebrate progress, the more that people are going to have a positive association with the change. Look at this result. Look at this, how it's feeling. It's starting to feel easier. People are less stressed. Having that positive association, doing that as quickly as possible, ultimately achieves the goal, which is to have people love the change as quickly as possible. So, how can you create a positive association? What potentially would get in the way of people having a positive association? If you can plan in advance how to impact that, you're more likely to make it happen. So I kind of just said, like, you can do those three things, but when are you going to do them? How are you going to do them? I highly recommend putting in your calendar reminders to appreciate or encourage, especially in this process if you do it, because you already have so many demands in your time as a leader that it's really easy to go through the entire day just focusing on the incredibly difficult and complex problems you have on your plate. And so you get to the end of the day and no appreciation or encouragement happened. It's very easy to do. It happens all the time. It's not because you don't want to, it's just because you're doing your thing. So having that reminder, do it in the morning, as soon as you sit down at your desk, when you get back from lunch, before you leave for the end of the day. If you had that embedded into your schedule, I guarantee you'd have a very big positive impact. Okay, issue number 3, underestimating the support needed. When I talked to my friend, when I told him I was doing this, he's like, oh yeah, the biggest thing that he saw is that underestimating the amount of support needed in order to achieve a successful change. Most people have no idea how long it takes to change behavior, to create a new habit. The myth is 21 days. That came from Maxwell Hintz. Anyway, he was a plastic surgeon in the 60s who noticed that it took his clients about 21 days to get used to whatever surgery he had performed. The latest research is that it could take anywhere from 18 days to 256 days for a new habit to be formed. So it takes way longer than you think. And no one can really say how long it takes because it completely depends on a person's inner world, what they're committed to, how they're approaching the change, how much this change impacts what they're afraid of. And that is personalized for each individual. So plan for a much longer support than you would expect, especially as it relates to telling the story and appreciating and creating a positive association. Now, it's really easy to be like, come on, this isn't rocket science, scientist. Oh, that person is so frustrating. Or that person is just terrible with technology. So impatience, condemnation is assigning a character trait or an action as a character trait. They're really stubborn is condemnation because you're saying they are that way. Resentment, I wish they would get it faster. I can't believe they're asking for this again. I totally went through this last week with them. All of that will continue to create a negative association with the change and kind of reset the clock for the habit. So if they've created a negative association, now you need to overcome the negative association and create a positive association. So essentially, you're starting the clock over again for that to become a habit. This really requires a high level of personal awareness. The most damaging limiting belief is that there is a way that it is or a way that people are. If you believe that, it's your judgment and interpretation, and you'll be communicating that in every interaction, even if you never say it. Okay, so workbook, just take a look. In your plan, where can we get Karen and team to provide more support? Ultimately, that makes the change faster, it gets the result quicker. Not that they would be the support, but it's everyone, right? Where is the support lacking? How can we ensure that people feel supported? So you can jot down a couple of ideas. Am I going to do a reminder? Am I going to check in? Okay. Long-term support in advance. So that's the strategy. How are we going to make a plan to ensure that this is happening? So they did a study, they've done it several times, and they asked someone to predict the incline of a hill they're standing beside. And what they determined that if they have a friend with them, they will predict the incline to be 20% less than it is. And if they don't, they will predict that the incline is more than it is. So simply, and the friend doesn't even need to be with them, they need to just be near them. So just feeling like a friend is near makes you feel like the task ahead of you is easier. When you think about long-term support, I want you to remember this story. If it feels like you have a friend with you when you're predicting or looking at the challenge, it will appear easier. Who are going to be your champions? It's very difficult as leaders with the demand on your time to ensure that you're creating a positive association, to remind people about the story at the end. Hey, this is why we're doing this. You can't be there every time. So activating those people on your team who maybe deal with change easier, maybe they're super into it, really help them and endorse them to be your champions. And don't forget to deal with the leaders. Now, if you're the senior leader, it might be about you reminding yourself, why are we doing this? Oh yeah, this is why we're doing it. This is where we're getting to. If you're in the middle manager role, or if you're in implementation, it's also about continuing to reinforce that long-term support, checking in, feeling like they have a friend with them to do the climb together. And remember that positivity doesn't persist. Just because you said it once doesn't mean they're not going to wake up the next day predicting struggle. Having an easy way for people to check in is great, whether it be someone on their team, maybe it's a survey model, great, a ticketing model that Umbrella might have. Hey, what about this? But an easy way for people to feel like they can get the support that they need, even if it's emotional. Okay, so the plan, implementation plan, just make a note. Who will be your cheerleaders? And for a personal change, having a cheerleader goes a long way to helping you. Like, if it's just yourself, it's really hard to have change happen. But if you've got someone who's an accountability partner, I think that, I don't know what the statistics are, but twice as likely, 3 times as likely for your change to be successful. How will you check in so everyone feels supported, so they feel like their friend's there? And how will you keep on ensuring using strategy number 1 and 2, that you're creating a positive association? Remember, it doesn't persist. It requires attention on a day-to-day basis. So just take a minute, make a couple of notes there. The funny thing is, I have no idea whether anybody's taking any notes. Like, you might be like, okay, I'm going to check my email when it says, do a note, but that's okay. But hopefully what's happened is you have some ideas about how to make any change that you're going through right now more successful than before. So my name's Rnold Smith. Here's my contact information. You can take a screenshot. I'm typically, I work with leaders. I have a program called the Inspiring Manager Program, which teaches leaders 3 commitments and 9 skills. One of the things that people often struggle with is giving feedback, being able to deal with performance issues. And so if that's something that of interest to you, for this group, I'm offering a free workshop on the no criticism coaching method. And if you book it's no charge if you book by February 8th. It's just a great way for me to introduce myself to new people. And now, questions. I'm going to stop share so I can be with you. I invite you to come on the screen, and so we can see each other. But you may have questions, or you may have what I'd really like to hear is also, like, what was most valuable for you? What was something that like, hopefully, so my goal is that you all got value. So hopefully one of you got at least one thing of value from this presentation, so that your time here wasn't wasted. So I'd love to hear what was valuable for you, or if you have any questions about something I said.
Thank you very much, Rnold. That was like so good. I felt like I just came out of a university lecture, but like a good university lecture.
Okay, good.
I definitely got value, and I was taking notes, and yeah, I definitely got value out of it. So I hope everyone here got value. And do any of you have questions for Rnold?
Thank you for the acknowledgement, Karen.
I have a question for you, Rnold. So on strategy 3, you were talking about a champion. And so I often tell our customers that for a project to be successful, that you need to have a champion. And so is the champion also the cheerleader?
They can be 2 different people, but often they're one and the same. So some people may struggle, but they just have a positive outlook, and they might be better off as cheerleaders. Then you have champions who maybe aren't great communicators, who that can solve problems. So they might be the same person, or they might be different. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm having problems with that too. But you know what? I think that, cheerleader, 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 then. Because sometimes you go to like person, hey, Rnold, can you help me with this thing? Oh my God, you're still struggling with that? Sure, I'll help you. So it depends on how it goes, right? They're different helpfulnesses.
That's not positive association. It was negative.
It's not positive
I was
association.
listening.
Very good. And it's just, I always find it so remarkable how hard that is, like how automatic it is for us to just predict misery and upset and worry and fear. And it's just right there,
Mhm.
but we're not really present to it. Like it's just like it often occurs like a low level of anxiety. And so if you ask people, are you upset? They'll say no. But you can tell when you've had an impact. There'll be a physical reaction. Like that's the extraordinary listening piece. They're being able to see, you can actually see a change in their body. One of the gifts of listening is that you can actually impact to someone simply by giving them all your attention. And you can see it change, sometimes change in their body. They're like, yeah, this, and then they're like, and you're listening, and you're like, then they're kind of relaxing their shoulders, and then the face will have softened, and that's just from giving them a chance to speak. So you'll see the impact of the positivity. You can see when you give that meaningful appreciation, did it land? Oh yeah. And like you can see their body relax. And that's that's the kind of listening you want to develop as a leader. But it's you can't be in the automatic mode as well. Like you have to be fully present. Everybody knows how, that's one of the challenges of life, right?
Mhm.
Mindfulness and the practice, but it's incredibly powerful when you do it.
Especially nowadays.
Mhm.
One of the things, I'm not sure if I said this at the beginning, but our world is in where there's some changes happening. I don't know if you guys have noticed. So
Yes.
there's this incredible force of change happening, and I think being able to help with the human side of change is going to be one of the most important skills. There's the on the microcosm, changing your software system, but there's some changes that are happening that are pretty sweeping in our society, and people who are able to predict the future, help people shift their prediction so they're not sitting in the misery. Because it's really easy to predict, if you're looking at the world, predict what's not going to go well, but it's harder to get your mind to look at how it's going to go well. I heard,
Mhm.
what's his name?
Sorry, Arnold, I don't mean to cut you off, but we only have 1 minute
Oh,
left. So I just
right.
want to
Okay.
give everyone one more chance to ask Arnold questions.
Thanks, Karen.
I don't have a question, but I just want to give you my appreciation on this topic, which is very pertinent in business for sure. But I think the two things that kind of struck me was the fears that are associated with just being human, I think.
Yeah.
And then to kind of offset that, I think the appreciation, if we're more appreciative of people around us and somewhat to ourselves, right? Because we
Mm.
blame ourselves and
Absolutely.
take it out on ourselves. So yeah, to be kind to ourselves as well. But I think those were two things that kind of impacted. We recognize the fear and we can somehow offset that with appreciation. I think that's a good thing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dolores, for saying that. I'm just going to assume that everybody else had that exact same experience and they had that great value, because that would make me feel good. But if anybody else has anything they want to throw in the chat that they like, they don't feel like getting on camera, that'd be great. So this was
I'll
part one.
just,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, I was just going to read you a couple of comments, and they were good
Oh,
comments for you,
okay, good.
Arnold. So in the chat, one person said that he got pulled elsewhere, but he wanted to thank you very much, and very insightful discussion, lots of good insights to succeeding with change, and he's looking forward to the second session. And
Great.
another person said, thank you, Arnold, that was fantastic. So great job.
Excellent. And so the next time, if you want to come, it really is about like when people struggle with change. Like if you personally have been trying to make a change in your life and you haven't been able to, that's what the next workshop's about. Like, how do you people like just like, somehow they're the end stragglers, like everybody else has moved on and is happy, but they're still, how do you deal with them? That's what the next workshop's about.
Yeah. And if there's anybody in your organization that you think would benefit from this workshop, please invite them to attend the next workshop. There will be a registration link on the next newsletter, or I think Jermaine will probably send out the recording for this workshop and then have a link for part 2. If you haven't already registered, please register.
Yeah. Here's my
Thank you so
contact-
much, Arnold.
You're welcome. Here's my contact information again, if you missed it. Otherwise, I'm very vain, so my website is my name, so that's that makes it easier. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's great. That was
10:32, thank you
fantastic.
for the extra time. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks again. Yeah, and thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye now.